Hey there, it's Paul Kirch, host and founder of Boss Academy Radio, and I want to bring you another episode of Boss Academy Transformations. Today I want to talk about a topic that I think is going to be near and dear to your heart. I think every entrepreneur has faced it, and it's overwhelm. What do we do when we're overwhelmed? We feel like we're pulled in a million directions. All these things are coming at us. Email, maybe Facebook is a distraction, and we don't necessarily get drilled in on what we need to do. Well, in the book Steal the Show by Michael Port, a phenomenal read for anybody that does any stage time or that wants to do more public speaking. I recommend you read this. But he references how one of his colleagues talks about overwhelm. He says that it's not that we don't necessarily have too much on our plate, because that's what we always say. We've got too many things going on, too much on our plate. The truth be told, it comes down to not knowing what to do next. And I think that's the key. Getting clear on what tasks are priorities for the day. What next? Because what happens to me, I know when I face overwhelm, maybe I just got done doing something and I don't know where to go next. And so I find myself distracted. I find myself looking at email, connecting with people that I shouldn't be on Facebook, or doing things that I shouldn't be doing because I don't necessarily have clear direction on what to do next. So when I get clarity and I know my why behind what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and when it needs to get done, that allows me to prioritize. So know your steps for the day. You don't necessarily have to have every minute mapped out. In fact, you don't even have to have every hour mapped out. But if you know your maybe 2 or 3 musts for the day, and you can go from one to the next and get those done, then you've got time to go do those other things. See, overwhelm itself is not the issue. You may have a lot on your plate, but there's people way busier than you are, like the President of the United States, top CEOs that have way more on their plate than you probably do. They get it done because they've got priorities. They've got things mapped out. So we need to do some of that ourselves. So focus on getting your why behind why you're doing it, what it is you need to get done, and when it needs to be done, and then prioritize it and go make it happen. So instead of just bouncing all over the place, you're going to find yourself getting some real clarity. One of our loyal listeners, who I greatly appreciate, had asked me, he said, Paul, I love your show. There's so much great content that comes out of Boss Academy Radio. But the problem is there's so much content that comes out of Boss Academy Radio, and I don't know where to start. Sometimes I find myself with this huge list of things to do, and I don't know where to begin. What do I do? Well, I think it comes down to, once again, prioritizing. If you're listening to one of our episodes and you walk away with 5 or 6 nuggets, you cannot implement all of those at once. So you've got to figure out what's the most priority. What's the one that's going to make the biggest impact fastest? And maybe that's where you start. So you drill down on that 1, maybe 2 items, and you start to make some momentum there, and you take action immediately. Tony Robbins always talks about taking massive and immediate action. The reason being is we human beings are fickle little creatures, and what happens if we don't take action? Our mind says, you know what? There's pain associated with that. We didn't take action on it. It must not have been a priority. We're going to put that off to the side. Then what happens is later, when we do go to actually tackle it, we've come up with a million reasons why it won't work, why it's a waste of our time, why it's not a priority. Don't let that happen. We need to take immediate action. Immediate action is the answer. You create momentum, and then it becomes more of a priority. If you don't allow it to become a priority, then you've got yourself in a situation where you're going to fall into that trap of saying, you know, it probably wasn't that great of an idea. Yeah, someone else is probably already doing that. Well, I don't have time for that because it isn't something you made a priority in the moment. So I would tell you that create your list of things that you want to work on and prioritize and figure out what's first and start taking action right away. And then what happens is if you create momentum and you're making progress, you're going to pull that list out and you're going to go, okay, you know what? This was successful. I need to keep going down this list. Maybe there's some other things I can integrate and find ways to do that. Overwhelm is a word that we use a lot as entrepreneurs. And it comes down to, for me, when I'm disorganized or I don't truly have my priorities in check, because I am bouncing all over the place. If I know what's next, it's easy. And you can simplify this process by creating a little structure in your life. I haven't always been the most structured person, but when I create structure around my days and know what's next, it becomes a simple process of going from point A to point B. And at the end of the day, you've accomplished so much more than if you just find yourself bouncing around. And I will tell you, 5 minutes on Facebook easily becomes an hour. So another thing that I use is the Pomodoro timer. I've talked about the Pomodoro technique, where you take 25-minute blocks and work hard on those 25-minute blocks on a concentrated task. At the end of that 25 minutes, you can take a 5-minute break. After you've done like 3 Pomodoros, you can take a 15-minute break, and you use this throughout the day to keep yourself focused. What happens when that timer's going? You feel like guilty if you move away from that task, so you need to stay focused. So overwhelm itself is a word that we overuse. It just comes down to not knowing what's next. So I would encourage you, take some time out, plan your day, figure out what are the top priorities for this day. Maybe it's 3 musts. What are those musts that I have to have done today? And you plan how you're going to go from one to the next to the next. Once those 3 are done, you're going to have some free time to do some other things. And then you can create your next series of musts, because you're going to have your priority 1, your priority 2. And then you just keep going and you just keep pushing forward. By the end of the day, you're going to have more done and more focus than you ever dreamt you could. And if you don't take time to do it, you are going to live in a world where overwhelm is a word that you use as an excuse, because that's all it is. And it's the same excuse I've used. It's the same excuse so many of my friends and colleagues have used. And it's a word we need to get out of our repertoire. Once again, I'm Paul Kirch, host and founder of Boss Academy Radio. This has been another simple episode of Boss Academy Transformations. I hope you took away something from this, and I hope it is really helpful. Go out and make things happen. Thanks.